Live from the Business RadioX studio inside Renaissance Bank, the bank that specializes in understanding you. It's time for North Fulton Business Radio.
And hello again, everyone. Welcome to another edition of North Fulton Business Radio. I'm John Ray, and we are broadcasting, as we usually are, from inside Renaissance Bank in beautiful Alpharetta. And if you're looking for a bank that is not going to pull the mega bank treatment on you, if you know what I mean, and if you're at one of those banks, you know what I mean. If you're looking for a bank that's big enough to handle all your needs as a small, medium-sized business, but they do it in a personal way, I think Renaissance Bank is that bank. That's what I found in my dealings with them. So if you're looking for something different, go to renaissancebank.com, find their local office, some 200 or so across the Southeast, and give them a call. And I think you'll be glad you did. Renaissance Bank, understanding you, member FDIC. And now I want to welcome Jesse Morton. Jesse is managing director. He's the Atlanta office leader of Stout. Jesse, welcome.
Thanks so much, John.
Yeah, welcome back, actually. So,
yes,
yeah,
thank you.
Great to have you back in the studio. Let's, for those that don't know you, let's give an introduction to you and to Stout. How are you serving the market out there?
Yeah, thanks, John.
Yeah.
So Stout generally is a global financial advisory firm. We have a little over 900 employees in 25 offices globally, about 19 in the U.S. And 6 overseas. My specialization is working with disputes, compliance, and investigations. And recently I've been helping hundreds, actually thousands of businesses on the employee retention tax credit. And my expertise in that area is that I have been working for years, actually decades, although I hate to admit it's been that long, helping the government and private businesses working against the government with fraud, waste, abuse, misconduct, and non-compliance related issues in government programs, as well as anti-money laundering related issues. So that's how I got into this area when the pandemic first hit, and there were numerous new types of programs out there to provide different types of aid, and there was a need in the market for someone with my background to help businesses navigate through some of the complexities of the money and the programs that were out there.
Right. And we'll get to this here in just a second, but yeah, I mean, it's great that some of these programs got put out there, but then there are abuses to them. And we'll talk a little bit about that here in a second. But for those that don't know, I mean, let's just describe very briefly what the employee retention tax credit is all about.
Yeah, absolutely. So the employee retention tax credit was one of 2 economic stimulus programs, the other being the Paycheck Protection Program, that was designed to help small businesses that were impacted by the pandemic. And the employee retention tax credit, again, along with the Paycheck Protection Program, were both established in late March of 2020, right at the onset of the pandemic. And what the employee retention credit was designed to do was to help businesses that were impacted either financially or non-financially through complying with the government COVID-related orders. So what the employee retention credit does, and there have been several pieces of legislation that have amended it, but I will talk about the final version, the one that is currently active. What it does is it provides up to $26,000 per employee of a tax credit that is received in the form of a physical check from the IRS for businesses that were affected in one of 2 ways. There's the financial way and the non-financial way. The financial way is if a business had a significant reduction in revenue from their 2019 revenues to 2020 and or 2021, then a business may be eligible to claim the credit.
Right.
The second way, the non-financial way, is if a business had to make modifications to its operations in order to comply with government COVID orders. And those modifications had a more than 10% impact on its operations, then it may also be eligible for the employee retention credit.
Right. So there are some fairly specific guidelines there. Just as a point of reference, how long is this program going to be open in terms of being able to file?
Yeah, so the duration of the actual claim is relevant for the period of March 2020 through September of 2021. Mm-hmm. The 2020 claims for those businesses that may be eligible to file the claim for 2020 have to be filed by April 15th of 2024. Mm-hmm. And the ones in 2021, the claims for 2021 have to be filed by April of 2025.
Got it. So really, what it is an attempt to, very similar to PPP, help, but just a different manner of applying the aid, right? It's a way to help businesses that retained employees through the pandemic, basically.
Yeah, and I would say more broadly than that, it was really designed as a way to help make whole businesses that were generally impacted, again, either financially or non-financially or both by the pandemic. And of course, the ultimate goal is to provide the aid and make them whole so that these businesses can continue to retain and hire employees, right, as opposed to making layoffs, which many businesses either did or strongly contemplated early on in the pandemic because they just simply did not have the same business model or didn't need the same number of people based on a variety of reasons. So certainly the primary purpose was to make sure that businesses that were impacted did continue to keep and retain employees. Got
it. Now, Jesse, you are of the view that there are a lot of, we'll call them services providers who, some of them which may be brand new, that have been and continue to make ERC claims on behalf of clients that are those claims are based on we'll say faulty following of the law. Is that a fair way to put it?
Yes, exactly. So the IRS put out a notice back in October that was designed to warn employers that were interested in exploring the employee retention credit or had already filed the employee retention credit, that essentially was designed to put employers on notice that employers are responsible for the tax filings that they make. And it reminded taxpayers that there are a lot of very aggressive ERC firms that are out there. There are a lot of firms that had little to no experience with tax filings or accounting related issues and legal issues for that matter that popped up, not surprisingly, because there's a lot of money at stake here, $26,000 per employee, which again, I mean, it can be life-changing money for a lot of business owners. And what the IRS notice warned employers was that a lot of these companies that popped up simply are not qualified to make an appropriate assessment as to whether an employer should be filing a claim. And there are also a lot of businesses that are taking extremely aggressive positions. And full disclosure, the IRS guidance around employee retention credits is it's pretty vague, mm-hmm. and there's also not a lot of it. But even though it is vague, and a lot of the areas are open to interpretation, some of which are open to fairly liberal interpretations. Even so, there are a lot of companies, and again, this is reiterated in the IRS notice, that are being flat out too aggressive. And they are making statements and assertions to taxpayers and to small business owners that are just simply false. And what they're doing is they're putting these small business owners in a very difficult situation, because what the IRS has the ability to do, and what they remind employers in this situation, is that if an employer makes a claim, even if the employer, who may know little to nothing about employee retention credits and rely on an advisor, they ultimately are responsible for the accuracy of the tax filings that they make. And if they make a tax filing that is overly aggressive or takes too much openness or a too liberal interpretation or a too aggressive interpretation of the guidance, and they ultimately get challenged, the taxpayer can be on the hook for going through an audit. If they're not able to substantiate their claim and they don't have proper documentation, it can be an extremely painful process that ultimately may result in not only repaying the amount of the claim, but it could also open them up to fines, penalties, interest, and in extreme cases, it could result in criminal liability.
So what are some of these, you mentioned some of these aggressive stances, I guess, that some of these providers are taking when it comes to applying the credit to a particular filing. So what are some of those aggressive standards or positions, I should say, that you quarrel with?
Yeah, I think there are a couple things that a lot of these companies are doing. One is we are seeing a trend with these improper filings, and this isn't always the case, but one is when was the business when is the ERC business, when was it established? Mm-hmm. Was it established right when this program came out, and was it established just to do these credits? If so, that's a bit of a red flag. If you've got a business that's been around for years and years and they've been working on tax-related issues, gives you a little bit more confidence that they probably know what they're talking about and are more reliable. With regard to specific things that we're seeing in the claims, and again, a lot of this is laid out in the IRS guidance, is we're seeing that a lot of these businesses are, one, leaving taxpayers with little to no supporting documentation for their claim. Mm-hmm. So they are not providing them with the actual ERC calculations. They're not providing them with a comprehensive analysis that analyzes and substantiates exactly how and why the business was qualified. We're also seeing that they are frequently relying on government orders that they should not be relying on. So, for example, there are several companies that are taking the position that a recommendation that was made early on in the pandemic by the Centers for Disease Control, CDC, and the OSHA are relevant orders that can be relied upon to make an ERC claim. And recent guidance, especially in a recent IRS audit guide, makes it clear that those just flat out are not relevant orders that can be relied upon. It's also explicit in the IRS guidance that face mask orders alone are insufficient for a claim to be made and to rely on as an order for a basis of a claim. Mm-hmm. We're also seeing that there is a provision in the IRS Notice 2021-20, which is the ERC guidance that says that if a business was unable to get critical goods and materials from a supplier due to the supplier being fully or partially suspended, so being closed for a period of time, then that is also sufficient for a claim. And we're seeing a lot of claims from small businesses that go through a lot of these, what the IRS refers to as ERC mills, making very broad and sweeping statements about supply chain related issues. I don't think it's any secret that certainly beginning in late 2020 and well throughout 2021, and we're still seeing it, there are massive supply chain related issues. They exist in almost every single industry. And a lot of these ERC mills are making very broad, sweeping statements without pointing to specific suppliers or specific orders that businesses are eligible just because of the supply chain related issues generally.
Well, let me make sure to clarify here. So there's, one way to qualify would be to have a material reduction in revenue. We won't get into time frames and all that stuff, folks. I mean, you can contact Jesse for further detail on that. But the point is, for reduction in revenue from 2019, which was the year before the pandemic, to 2020, 2021, right?
Yes.
So, if you had down revenue and you qualify under that provision, this other stuff really doesn't matter, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So what we're talking about is if you had revenue that was the same or higher, that there are, and you've got a ERC tax credit advisor who's coming up with leaning on not going into the office orders or face mask rules or something like that, then that's where you've got some issues.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Because I don't want to scare people that they qualify under very specific guidelines that are easy to point to, right, in terms of just your revenue being down.
Yeah, and the best way to think about this is that the revenue test, which again, we won't go into the specifics, but if a business qualifies on the revenue test, that is considered to be a safe harbor.
Okay, got it. Okay.
And what we're talking about is what's called the full or partial suspension of operations test, which is more subjective.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to say a judgment call, right? And so what you're relying on is the judgment of your advisor, and which is why the IRS would suddenly be concerned about whether that advisor has been in business for 35 minutes or more, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, got it. Yeah. Okay, that makes perfect sense. So are we, it's interesting to me that the IRS has figured out there's a problem so quickly. Why do you think that happened? I mean, because there are a lot of filings that have not even been made yet, right?
Exactly, and it's an interesting issue because on the one hand you have the GAO, the Government Accountability Office, that put out a report saying that in their estimation, 70% of businesses that are eligible have not applied for this credit, which is a clear indication that they recognize that a lot of businesses just haven't explored this opportunity, and more businesses should. On the other hand, what you have is the IRS that is looking at what the original budget was for this program, which was about $8 billion. And I don't know the exact figure now, but they are well into the hundreds of billions of dollars of claims.
Yeah.
And I think if I had to, I'm speculating here, but if I had to guess, what the IRS is doing is two things. They're looking at what was budgeted versus what's actually coming in, and they're saying, why is there such a discrepancy? And they've discovered that people are taking certain aggressive positions with the guidance. And number two is I'm sure that probably all your listeners have seen commercials and heard radio ads and have probably been bombarded with emails and other types of communications from what I would consider to be pretty aggressive marketing tactics and information that is just simply not accurate. So I think the IRS sees that, and they've looked at the dollars that have been budgeted versus spent, and they see, what I'll call the tangible ads and marketing, and they're saying we've got a problem here.
Right. That makes sense. And it's pretty easy for the IRS to do send out a letter and say, give us the reasons, the substantiation in terms of why you made the claim, right? I mean, in terms of if your revenue's down and shows your financials, that's pretty easy to take you out of consideration for a full scale audit, right? But if you if that's not the circumstance for you, you better have your rationale buttoned down pretty tightly. So the question, I guess, is for those that are suddenly thinking about that and thinking, have I gone down the wrong trail? How should they check that? What should they do?
Yeah, it's a great question. The IRS recently put out some information for the first time in a while as to specifically what they're going to be looking for. And the way this happens is when the IRS is concerned about a claim, or maybe they're just curious. Maybe I shouldn't say concerned. Curious about a claim.
Right.
They send out what's called an IDR, an information document request. And it's a pretty comprehensive list. But to narrow down on a couple key things, which again are the issues that we've seen where a lot of these ERC mills are leaving small businesses in a lurch. One is a business should have the calculations for the employee retention credit claim, and it should tie to the specific amount of the claim, and it should tie to the amount of the checks received. They are specifically also asking for copies of the government orders that force the business to make modifications that are the basis of the claim that resulted in a full or partial suspension of operations. They are also asking for specific copies of the government orders that resulted in supply chain related issues. If the reliance was primarily on supply chain, they're also asking for letters from the business's suppliers to prove that that business was fully or partially shut down. They're also asking for a very comprehensive analysis that ties the government orders to the modifications that were made, and then analyzes the specific impacts that resulted from those modifications. And that is not a one-page letter. That is not a paragraph. That is typically an extremely comprehensive analysis that's performed by a firm like Stout. There are other firms that do it as well and do it very well, or an attorney.
Sure. So you better have your documentation together is the answer. So I guess the question is, so if you have a circumstance where you're out there and you've got thousands or millions of dollars at stake here in some instances, should you get a second opinion, I guess, to use a medical term? Is that a wise thing to do? A wise expenditure of money?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And I would say that I think every business that filed an employee retention credit claim should spend a couple $1,000 or at least contact a trusted advisor and have them review the documentation and see whether you're in a good position or whether your file needs some, what I'll call remediation, needs some help.
Right. But let's give some comfort to those that need the comfort, those that are qualified and have no issues, right? And particularly those that have not filed, because sometimes what happens, and you know this quite well, is that people don't take advantage of what they could take advantage of legally because they're too scared they're going to get audited and caught in air quotes. Encourage those folks on this, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I know a lot of the things that I've said are pretty scary, and but the reality is that the Employee Retention Credit Program, it's a phenomenal program, much like the Paycheck Protection Program. Again, it's designed to help those businesses that were significantly impacted during the pandemic. It's a phenomenal program. It's a great opportunity for those businesses that fit within the guidance of those that should get the credit. And there are numerous types of businesses and businesses that are in areas that were more affected than others that should reach out to a good, educated advisor. And again, there are many CPAs, many firms, many attorneys who know this area well, and explore whether they have a good faith basis for making the claim and how strong that claim is. Because given the fact that this is a credit that is potentially up to $26,000 per employee, for a lot of businesses, this is life-changing money. It can completely change how a business operates. It can open up a lot of different avenues. It can result in being able to leverage it into operating lines of credit, making capital investments. I mean, it is a significant amount of money. So I don't want to encourage people to stay away from this credit and fear exploring it.
Yeah.
I want to encourage people to go into it eyes wide open, to do your due diligence and explore multiple businesses and multiple options. And I want people to know the questions that they should ask if they are going to go down this route, so that they're put in a very good, defensible position if their claim is ever challenged by the IRS, and not be put in a lurch when some of these businesses are that popped up at the onset of the pandemic are, no longer around, and they have no way to defend their audit, and the owners and a lot of the employees of these businesses are sitting on a beach in Belize or something like that.
Sure. Absolutely. Well, Jesse, this has been really important information, I think, for listeners. And, again, we could have a 2-hour show on this, right? And talk about all the ins and outs, and we can't do that. We're running up on time. But that's okay, because everybody's got their own circumstance, and that's where they need to be in touch with you, right? So let's give them directions on how they can do that.
Yeah, the best way to reach me is to send me an email. My email is jmorton, MORTON, @stout.com, and that is stout like the beer. Or you can go to www.stout.com, and we do have a page on employee retention credits. Or you can give me a call. My phone number is 678-573-2686. But I welcome any and all communication, and certainly look forward to hearing some of your audience with any questions that they have.
Sure. I think the advice has been stout today too, to extend the metaphor there. So Jesse, this has been great. No, seriously, thank you so much for coming in and talking about this issue, and we appreciate the work you do. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. Hey folks, just a quick thought for you. If you're Jesse mentioned that bookkeeping with receipts falling out of the shoebox kind of thing. Well, if you've got that issue or you've got administrative tasks that you're struggling to keep up with in your business, it could be that you just don't need to be doing that stuff, that you need to be out in the front office working with clients and prospective clients. So here's a suggestion for you. Go to officeangels.us, or better yet, give Essie Escobedo over at Office Angels a call, 770-442-9246. They've been around for over 2 decades. And what they do is they have a whole team of angels that fly in, get the job done, whether the job is bookkeeping or administrative tasks, or maybe it's presentations or marketing, but any of those kind of things that you need done, they will do on an ongoing or as needed basis. And they've got a great team. I know that because I use some of their services myself. So if that's a problem for you in your business and you want to take the next step in your growth, give Essie a call, and I think you'll be glad you did. And folks, just a quick reminder, I've got a book coming out this year. It's called The Price and Value Journey, Raising Your Confidence, Your Value, and Your Prices Using the Generosity Mindset Method. And it's for solo and single and small professional services folks that you're having trouble with your pricing. So if that's an issue for you, you'd like to know more, go to pricevaluejourney.com. You can sign up for updates on when the book's coming out and other information as well. And I'd be honored if you are interested in that and want to learn more. And a big thank you to all our listeners. So we've passed show number 600 for North Fulton Business Radio, and we're still going strong, and we're excited about where we have been and where we're going, and we can claim that because of you, because of your support of our work. You've continued to share the show when you found information that you think a colleague or a friend might be interested in. I can't imagine that there wouldn't be a reason to share this show given the information that Jesse has given us. So please continue to do that, and please continue to listen and support us. We're grateful for that as we celebrate business leaders like Jesse and the great work that they do in our community. So for my guest, Jesse Morton, I'm John Ray. Join us next time here on North Fulton Business Radio.